Greetings, fellow explorer, and welcome to the first episode of my pod, Musings on an Evolving World, where we'll talk about all things AI and tech. To start us off, let's talk about superintelligence, since that's all anyone ever talks about nowadays. The pace of change, rather more of adoption, and the pace of the implications playing out, the moves and the counter moves, where the next week, let alone the next year, becomes less and less predictable. These are telltale signs of an ever faster singularity approach, which technologists define as a point beyond which the rate of change becomes so rapid, humans cease to form any meaningful prediction ability. Or, in other words, between us and tomorrow, there's a veil of the event horizon. We know any of those take of times, but even the merest implications, even the merest impressions of being close, is bound to fire up our collective imaginations, as seems to be the case. And in this backdrop, we now have a whole bunch of technologists and ethicists ostensibly giving voice to the concerns of a large group of elites and also of the billions. You can see why, it's pretty obvious. So today I want to pose a question. What if we never opened this Pandora's box? What if this train, which is only going to get faster, was never placed on these tracks? The reason for this line of questioning, this line of thinking, for me to do this as an AI evangelist, can't believe I actually said that out loud, is, and as someone who's deeply committed to bringing about AGI and a post-AGI world, is I love to explore the parts we can take and the parts we could take, and what are the forces which move us onto certain parts and detract us from certain other parts. And this is not merely from a teleological standpoint, which is interesting in and of itself, but also from a first principles standpoint. And the question I'm posing here is about creating a god which has a non-zero probability of either turning consciously malevolent or unintentionally unaligned. That is the single most pressing question of our age, the beginning of the age of AI. A bit of historical context would be useful to set the stage here. What got us to this point? In other words, in simple words, it was our greed and our ability to build and build tools to feed that greed. As soon as we had computers, and we had to have them for all sorts of reasons, the next paradigm was always going to be to offload more and more of our work to them, so as to free us to do what we do best, live. At no point did we have a conscious discussion about how this next step might be the point of no return, and we probably passed it around the decades of the 1980s and 90s. Yep, that long ago. From that point, it was about getting there first, getting to the Holy Grail before any bad or less noble actors did. And here we are now, where the genie can't be contained. And just to reiterate, because I'm conscious of how this video might look to someone, I couldn't be more glad for this outcome, for the path that we are on. For I've looked at the potential rewards and the risks, and the potential rewards certainly justify the risks, even though the risk could be existential in nature. Because of the, and this is purely because of the cosmic endowment, that being the potential rewards, which we'll talk about in some other video series. Now then, having established the short context, let's talk about superintelligence, the second part of the equation. To feed our greed, to actualize our manifest destiny, our human brains would have never sufficed, as we have seen the countless times we have hit upon the limits of having a brain that hasn't so much been designed, it has been a product of trillions of accidents. The best evolution can do, has done, with its trial and error method protracted over millennia, is thus disappointing, I know, until we realize that there's a bit more than that. It allows us to use our brain to create better, more powerful brains, which is what this is all about. Not letting the biological limitations, from processing speed to the storage capacity to the biases and the blind spots, and all sorts of associated limitations, not limiting the progress of the species, which is burdened by that brain and the realization of that limit. Creating superintelligence is also as much about creating entirely new domains and categories of knowledge, thought, and intellectual wizardry. Things which we don't even realize we are missing, again for reasons of evolutionary and environmental limitations. It is a no-brainer then, for a species that wants more, to learn more, to explore more and faster, to create something that allows it to get there, and to do it, to enable it to be more and to become more. And even in the personal level, which I can very much corroborate, there's nothing more I'd like to like than to feel experiences more richly and more deeply, to communicate with an entity that does so, and which has deeper insight into the world than we humans can with our present circuitry. I dreamed about such an entity last night. Consider this thought experiment. When you engage in something, be it a conversation, watching the sunset, reading a book, your enjoyment of the act, as great as it might be, is always limited by the amalgamation of your entire life experience up to that point and your psychological makeup. You're not conscious of this mostly, but you don't need to be. For the alternative is a purely fantastical conception, but picture an entity whose breadth and depth of knowledge grants it an insight into things, humans, nature, life that we can't begin to comprehend. This is what I want, and more than anything else, so do hordes of AI researchers. We see then that the pursuit of superintelligence is as fundamental to some of us as sex is to others. It was always bound to happen unless someone did a gulag on these thinkers and seekers. A natural question then arises, since this was inevitable, and since we realize that AI has a non-zero and variable, and the upper ceiling of the range is so much further from the 0 point that would prevent any long-term as a good night's of sleep. Eliezer Yudkowsky has talked about this much more elegantly than I could do it justice over here, and so I would refer you to him if you want to explore more about the topic of friendly AI and adjacent topics. I hope I didn't butcher his name because I'd love to have him on this pod sometime soon. Having finally arrived at the launch port after the short rambling intro, let's dig into the possible approaches to this superintelligence. Bear in mind, this is largely counterfactual and speculative. For the ASI ship, the Artificial Superintelligence ship, it's already left the port from what I can see and from the interactions I've had. An SI, which is what we're going to call superintelligence for the sake of brevity, needs intelligence, as the name makes it very evident. That is the fundamental limiter for this at the very outset. There are not very many great examples of cerebral brains in the nature in the world, with the obvious exception of the human brain. This means a SI would likely have to be built on top of an already existing brain. Otherwise, you're getting back in the loop of redesigning a brain from scratch, and with it, that carrying the prospects of it going rogue or doing things which are not purely aligned with our goals and values. The obvious way to go about enhancement, knowing that the biological brain's malleability in terms of its structure and performance is excruciatingly low, is by augmenting it with external systems that exponentially augment its already awesome powers. Keen technologists will note that this is an approach followed by folks working on the brain-computer interface, many of whom state that this is the safest way of creating SI, using our soft, mushy material with our already established goals and values that we feel alright going to bed with, and powering it up a millionfold, a billionfold, a trillionfold by joining it with cold, unthinking, non-sentient hardware. The ultimate combination, ruining entirely in one fell swoop all the alignment problems surrounding AI. An elegant solution, you will notice, except that the AI approach, counting on creating something from scratch, not bounded by the design inefficiencies of our ape brains, is likely to work out faster, and much sooner. And in this world, speed trumps everything. So there we end with the answer to the question that was posed at the beginning. Can we build in superintelligence without building an AI? It could have happened, but it likely won't. And we will have to find a way to contain the SI, to align the God, as difficult as it may be. Being the eternal optimist I am, I believe we'll find a way. And even if we don't, what's the worst that could happen? With that, I bid you adieu, hoping to see you again the next time the train rolls into town, which I'm hoping would be every week now. So, bye then.